I do property maintenance for a social services company, and sometimes the kids rage out, and we have situations where we end up with like holes in the walls and stuff like that. There's some over there as well. And we have to be able to patch up the walls. Like this was one that I had already done. Over here's areas that I had already repaired in a way that looks good, like good enough, but hides the damages. So we do that through a process called stippling, and I'm going to show you a little bit about how that's done so that you can actually like do your own repairs if you have a situation where, walls get broken sometimes, and it's important to know how to fix them so that the situations don't escalate, because just because a wall got broken doesn't mean that it's the end of the world. It's not a big deal. It can be fixed very easily, much more easily than people can. Here's an example of a patch that's already been roughed in. Somebody had previously cut out a square of the broken wall, put in a new piece of sheetrock, and then used tape around the edges and just did a rough coat of mud over it. And now I'm going to sand that off a little bit and show you how we make it blend in. I just use a basic sanding sponge like this and go through and rough it off a little bit. Try to blend it so that the paper doesn't stick out too much. Get the edges here. It doesn't have to be perfect because the way we're going to texture this is going to make it hide, but having a flat surface will help the mud get in there. And that's really all I'm going to do to prep it. And then I'm going to start mixing the mud. To prepare the mud, I'm really going to take a little bit of basic sheetrock compound, put it in my tray, and mix it in with a little bit of water. What's in there has already been mixed in. I was using it the other day, but you do need to water it down a little bit to get the right texture, to get this stuff to sit the way you want to, but it's got to be thick enough that it's going to stay on the wall. So I'm going to add a little bit of water and mix it up well. I'll show you what it looks like. You can see here that my mud is now whipped up a little bit. It's definitely a little bit more like a frosting than it comes out of the tub, like more like a solid paste. But now I'm going to basically, using this small trowel when it's this wet, just slap it on and just work it around just like that. And I'm not worried at all about smoothing it out. I don't want there to be huge lumps, but we don't care about, like you can see there, there's a little lumpy crap there that needs to come out. Can't have that. But the first step will be covering it up like that. Okay, so basically that's the coat of the wet mud on there. And now the next step will be to go in and texture it with this brush. Now, I'm using this brush, but you could really use just about any kind of a paintbrush. I do believe when the texture was put on this wall, it was done with a completely different type of brush, but when I've been working on this, I've had luck with this one in getting the blend that I'm looking for. And this is definitely a touch thing. You end up just getting used to it and getting better at it. But you end up, there's between bumping it and swiping a little bit to get the same pattern using different parts of the brush, you know, definitely a touch thing. But it's also something too, just like anything else. You know, you start developing the skill and you start getting better at it, and you do get a sense of pride of being able to make something disappear. And we're going for progress, not perfection. It's definitely not going to be exactly the same as it ever was. But when that dries in and it's painted, it'll be very hard to tell that's any different than the rest of the wall. With this patch, it was done a little bit differently, and instead of the drywall being put in, somebody just put a metal screen patch over the hole. And these are an item that you can buy at the home improvement store or whatever. You can actually see, I think that might be a little rust that got through it from some water here, but this is just another way to patch a hole. And when you do put these on and first mud them on, they look really bad. And you might be worried like, oh my God, you know, if you were doing like a nice flat dry wall, it's tricky to make these look right. It can be done, but there's definitely an art to it. But with a stipple situation like this, not a big deal. This is going to go right away. And again, we got the first coat mudded in there. I'm just going to do my art. And there's another one done. Only took a couple minutes. No big deal. When it paints in, it'll look a lot better. Here you can see the difference between the compound that had dried previously and the wet stuff. And it's getting closer to being dry enough to slap some paint on. But it would take a little bit. If you try doing it now, it's going to mess it up. I have another patch I'm going to try to paint. See if I have enough time to get it done. Now you can see where it's been freshly painted. And it's basically good from far, but far from good. But we're not going to worry about that. At the end of the day, it looks a lot better than what was there. What I just did there was hit the part that still wasn't quite dry with the paint, and I'm going to do the same over there. In this situation, I'll just tap it with the paintbrush a little bit to make sure the texture stays up. But you know, I want this kid to come back to this room and not see the scars that were here. And if you're very gentle with the paint, even if the compound's still a little bit wet, you can get away with it. But it doesn't come out quite as well, but good enough for government work. One of the things about doing this kind of work is that you basically have to be able to accept knowing that this isn't the end. Now, just because I fix this once doesn't mean that a couple of months from now, some other kid, some other person, whatever, isn't going to do the same thing. It's probably going to happen all over again. And I'll do the same thing all over again with the same kind of care and just understanding, because This is how it be. Walls get broken. Things get damaged. Not a big deal. Everything can be fixed. And there we go. Another one done. And that's how we make pain go away. Holes in walls happen. These situations got sorted out in about an hour and a half. When the paint dries, it'll look the same as the rest of the room. It's really that simple, and little things don't need to turn into bigger things.